2 years to the day.
Wow.
Last time we didn't find
flat circle.
terms, amicable terms. This time I think we were both pretty much like ready to move on with our lives, very much so. And well, I'm excited to announce that the lawsuit is finally over.
Wow.
Congrats.
It's over. We worked it out. And, you know, I actually sat with him one-on-one for a long time, and we chatted. And we got on very, you know, we're besties. We're besties now.
That must have been surreal.
You know how I am.
Sure.
We kind of hit it off immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, you can get along with anybody.
He's you know, we got on well. He was very nice, and to be honest, he was super reasonable too. And I think we're all just relieved that it's over. And as I said in the Instagram stories, it's you know, closing one battlefront so that we can open another one.
YouTuber Ethan Klein loses anti-SLAPP appeal in producer Ryan Kavanaugh defamation case. This was April 6th, 2025. So yeah, basically recently, so any H3 fans would know that Ethan Klein, he kind of went on a bit of a public fuck you to Ryan Kavanaugh. You know, he had the Ryan Kavanaugh or Harvey Weinstein website. He had, and yeah, a lot of attacks on this guy on his podcast, like a whole arc attacking him, which started because Triller Fight Club copyright claimed, I think, him covering the Jake Paul fight or something like that. I don't know. So people might not know this, but yeah, we're gonna go over this regardless of whether you really know the drama here or if you're just interested in defamation cases. We're gonna go into this in a little bit of depth, so that you guys understand exactly why he lost, and so you can perhaps not defame people if you happen to be American and a podcaster. So yeah, California Court of Appeal. So yeah, basically there was a prior ruling and then they took it to appeal court and it was maintained. But this article's pretty short, but it's fine because we have the exact case filing itself. So yeah, this first off I'll say I'm not a lawyer, but I do read English. So don't worry, guys. All I'm going to do is I'm going to convey the information in the document. I'm not going to make my own speculation. So yeah, basically the important context here really is the Variety article. And the main fact at contention here is the being accused of running a Ponzi scheme, and the article being cited to make that claim. So it's not about whether he looks like Harvey Weinstein. That's probably opinion. I don't know. But yeah, it's specifically this issue of whether Ethan Klein in the podcast presented it as such that the audience would be left believing that Ryan Kavanaugh had been accused by business partners of running a Ponzi scheme, basically. And like the extent of that. Because there is like some like awkward nuance here, which this will get into. Accused by ex-partner of running a Ponzi scheme. This is it. This is like probably what happened with H3, where they were looking for dirt on this guy and they saw that article headline. They were like, ooh, this is so fucking juicy. And they just relied on that a lot. They often showed the headline, etc. But yeah, the Variety article stated Elon Spa filed a lawsuit against Kavanaugh in June 6, 2019. So this is a true fact. However, so he filed a complaint. But then we will just keep going. So yeah, a bunch of stuff that basically said Kavanaugh might be doing a Ponzi scheme because Spa is accusing him of running a Ponzi scheme. And then within a day, this is the important part, a part that I think a lot of H3's audience wouldn't know. I didn't know this. And I mean, I'm not really a H3 fan, but I've definitely heard him say the other stuff about Ryan Kavanaugh. Within a day, Variety updated its article to inform its readers that Kavanaugh's representative sent Variety a statement that Kavanaugh and Spa had satisfactorily resolved all of their issues. According to Variety, the statement accused Variety of attempting to smear Kavanaugh and Spa by quoting from their lawsuits against each other. The statements claimed the dueling complaints were private documents that went public by mistake. Neither complaint was intended to be legally filed. They were submitted to the court by accident. Now, I don't know how true that is, but I guess the main point is that SPA had a retraction, okay? The main point is that whatever happened, whether it was actually intentional that the complaint was filed to begin with, and that SPA made this statement, but that they had already resolved all their issues, right? Included a retraction from SPA. This is the important part. SPA apparently has some regrets, saying that Kavanaugh is not really running a Ponzi scheme as he alleged in his suit. According to SPA, Kavanaugh has been funding the operation himself, to my knowledge, based on information provided to me. Kavanaugh has and is invested heavily in this business, and any reference to ESX or any related business as a Ponzi scheme is not accurate. And then all this bullshit, and he and I have no remaining disputes. So yeah. And then, okay, apparently there's some stuff about defendants saying that this is hearsay. I'm not going to get into this, but this is too advanced lawyering for me. But yeah, the important part is that there is basically this additional context to the Variety article that makes it clear that the accusation was resolved in some way, right? That, like, okay, there was this accusation that was apparently never meant to go public, and the person who made it doesn't believe that anymore, according to their publicly stated opinion, right? So a lot of omitting those facts when saying Ryan Kavanaugh had a guy accuse him of a Ponzi scheme does sound like defamation, perhaps. Yeah, okay. So here we go through Klein's statement. H3 After Dark, titled "And the Number of Babies Is." By the way, I'm not going to actually go and watch all these clips. You can do that if yourself, but it would take forever to find them all. According to his ex-partner, he runs a Ponzi scheme. That sounds super illegal, shady. That's not who I'd want running my business, Triller. So yeah, according to his ex-partner, he runs a Ponzi scheme. Not really. According to his ex-partner in the past, before his ex-partner issued a correction, and none of this was ever stated publicly. And according to his ex-partner, he was running a Ponzi scheme. Again, same kind of thing. Klein says, Trill lies about their numbers, so who knows? Allegedly, what do I know? I know this guy, Ryan Kavanaugh, is a piece of shit. I mean, he's run a Ponzi scheme, allegedly, from his partner. This is where he's, like, trying to say allegedly, and basically couching it all like, hey, look, there's this article here. I'm not saying this, it's this article that's saying it, but what he's not mentioning is the retraction. And the retraction was the same day or the day after. So it was within a day. So by the time, you know, this is July 1st, 2021. This is like 2 years later. Maybe slightly less. Maybe slightly more. I don't know. But, so yeah, basically, the retraction is in the article, right? And he's not mentioning that at all. Which is pretty misleading. You know, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of H3 or you hate Ryan Kavanaugh or whatever, you know. He's run a Ponzi scheme, allegedly from his partner. Owner of Triller, scammer, yeah, so. Basically, this is like, the point of this statement is that it's like, okay, the intention of me making this statement is to demonstrate that this guy's a scammer. This is what I'm saying, right? Like, my opinion is that he's a scammer, and it's supported by these facts of him scamming someone. But the facts aren't as they are presented, right? So Ryan Kavanaugh, he's the owner of Triller. He was the CEO, accused of running a Ponzi scheme. He's got a really dark history. I read this online. This is not me saying this, right? So yeah, I read this online. Okay, so partner alleged he ran a Ponzi scheme, if you believe that. Accused by ex-partner, blah, blah, accused by ex-partner. I first read he ran a Ponzi scheme in Variety by his ex-partner. Serious guy, Ponzi scheme enthusiast, blah, blah, blah. We get the idea, right? It's also, pretty much every one of these statements is like, he ran a Ponzi scheme according to his ex-partner, and here's this Variety article saying so, right? So yeah, we get the idea. There's just a whole bunch of statements like that. whole bunch of statements like that. And then, yeah, an anti-SLAPP motion. We won't get into the anti-SLAPP parts. And then, okay, so here's all the legal reasoning, right? So first off, 1, assertions of fact, 2, false, and made with actual malice. What is this? Wow. Okay, so yeah, these are the standards of defamation. Okay, so this is just this was like visually me trying to make sense of everything as I was reading. So natural tendency to injure or cause damage, I would say that's met by these. So yeah, Ryan Kavanaugh has been accused of running a Ponzi scheme. This is the statements made, right? It's kind of like a shorthand, but yeah, that's the general gist of the message of the combined statements. So yeah, natural tendency to injure or cause special damage, that's met because it would damage public image or trustworthiness in business dealings by being labeled a scammer. It's unprivileged, which is met, it just means like, wasn't said to a lawyer or doctor or whatever. Defamatory, yeah. I don't know exactly what the defamatory standard is, but it impugns his character. Like, it's not a positive thing, I guess. It's not like a nice thing said. Okay, and then false, right? This is the main question. Are they false statements? Because there was an accusation made at some point by the partner, right? So important context is omitted. The Variety article's correction. And then this is defamatory implication, right? So we will go to here. Defamation, blah, 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 blah. This is what I was just going over. And then defamation by implication. So if a defendant juxtaposes a series of facts so as to imply a defamatory connection between them or otherwise creates a defamatory implication, he may be held responsible for the defamatory implication even though the particular facts are correct. So this is actually pretty important, right? This is where the whole omitting context thing comes into play. And if you are a podcaster or public figure who is like thinking of trying to ride the line of defamation by implying a bunch of sinister stuff without directly saying it, you might want to be careful. So, to demonstrate defamatory by implication, you would have to meet these four standards. The interpretation of the statement is reasonable. So basically, the implication that you're making, that you're trying to make, like trying to say is actually reasonable. Like, me saying like, hey, it's good for you to eat apples to someone, then you saying, oh, are you implying that I'm fat? Are you implying that I'm unhealthy? That kind of thing, right? That would be an unreasonable interpretation of my statement, right? Like, you're assuming a lot, etc. And yeah, the implication is Ryan Kavanaugh is accused of running a Ponzi scheme by a business partner, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so implication. The implications to be drawn convey defamatory facts, not opinions. Implication, Kavanaugh is facing legal accusations of fraud/scamming by a former partner, which is false. Because the matter was settled, right? And the partner no longer stands by that previous statement. Challenged implications are not substantially true. And yeah, this is the problem with the implication. Yeah, it's not substantially true. So yeah. And yeah, it's a fact. It's not an opinion that either he is or he isn't being faced with this accusation of fraud, running a Ponzi scheme. I'm assuming Ponzi scheme will be a form of fraud. Identified reasonable implications could also be reasonably defamatory. So that's basically just saying that that's the defamatory standard again. And again, I think defamatory just means like not positive, but it probably has a more specific definition than that. So, okay. And then yeah, the anti-SLAPP stuff we're not going over because basically that's if you assume that SLAPP lawsuits are like lawsuits made without merit to like suppress speech basically, or like chill the opposition in some way. So once you show that a case is meritorious, it defeats the anti-SLAPP argument, is my understanding anyway. You can read this for yourself if you're interested in the anti-SLAPP side of things. But I feel like it's kind of a moot point. So, assertions of fact. So, yeah, this is the existence of falsehood, because a statement must contain a provable falsehood, statements of fact, and statements of opinion. So, yeah, assertion of fact. So, here are the things that they use to justify why it was an assertion of fact that Ryan Kavanaugh is accused of running a Ponzi scheme. First off is the business partner, ex-partner, referenced constantly by Ethan Klein, as the person alleging that Kavanaugh ran a Ponzi scheme, and then the audience message from this is that, oh, this isn't just something that Ethan Klein is making up, like, oh, this guy seems like the kind of guy who would run a Ponzi scheme. That might be opinion, right? Oh, this guy has Ponzi scheme running vibes. Yeah, you could that would be opinion, but referencing the ex-partner is putting it into the realm of statements of fact, because you're saying, no, this guy in particular accuses this person. And the implication is that this guy, as an ex-partner, would have had the dealings with Kavanaugh to support the idea that Ryan Kavanaugh might have been running a Ponzi scheme, right? And then published by Variety. Further evidence that the statements were presented as fact rather than opinion, right? He's not saying, I think this. He's saying, this is something that happened. Look, Variety published this. And then, yeah, falsity. So, yeah, so first off, in terms of, so yeah, this is all about assertions of fact, right? First off, proving that it's a fact, not opinion, and then false assertion of fact, which is the other part of defamation, right? Kavanaugh's statements. So, how we know that these are false statements are basically that Kavanaugh has explained how it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, and then Lambert, I don't know exactly who Lambert is. I'm guessing Lambert isn't the same person as the ex-partner guy, Elon Spar. But yeah, we can go. Defendant also sought to bolster the veracity of challenge statement by saying they were published in Variety. Defendants do not avoid liability for their factual assertions that Kavanaugh, because they relied on Spar's allegation in his complaint, or that allegation. So yeah, this is basically just saying that repeating rumor or gossip isn't defended just because, you know, you're using a source to launder that. Defendant's contention that the audience interpreted statements as a meme, even if true, you know, basically it's like it could be humorous, but also damaging if it's treated as true, right? Accordingly, Kavanaugh presented sufficient evidence to establish a prima facie case that the challenge statements were assertions of fact, and defendants do not identify sufficient evidence that disprove the challenge statements as assertions of facts. Yeah, that's what I was going over earlier. And then the falsity. So yeah. So in terms of falsity, we have Kavanaugh basically supported the contention with a bunch of his own declarations and declaration from Michael Lambert, his partner in Proxima. So basically, they demonstrated through all this different, you know, facts about how the business was run that no, it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, and that the funds were handled in a non-Ponzi scheme way. You know, we don't really need to go into the details, but basically, it was demonstrated that the idea that Ryan Kavanaugh ran a Ponzi scheme was false. Okay. Then we go to actual malice. Knew the statement was false or reckless disregard of whether it was false or not, or true or not, I guess. So, this is the main thing, I guess, right? Variety article and campaign against Kavanaugh are the points that they use here. So, under which we'll see what it says. A subjective test under which the defendant's actual belief concerning the truthfulness of the publication is the crucial issue. This test directs attention to the defendant's attitude towards the truth or falsity of the material published, not the defendant's attitude towards the plaintiff. Yeah. Basically, what matters is whether the defendant thought that it was true what they were saying or not. A defendant cannot automatically ensure by testifying that he published with the belief that the statements were true. The finder of fact must determine whether the publication was indeed made in good faith. So it's not enough to just say, I believed it was true. You also have to show some kind of good faith. Like, okay, But why? Why did you believe it was true? Can you give a rationale that makes sense? And yeah, the circumstantial evidence is kind of against them, because reckless disregard is crucial facts when it is aware of true crucial facts but decides to leave them out of its statements and thereby leaves a false impression. And here's kind of what Ethan Klein seemed to do here. Sufficient evidence to establish a case of prima facie malice. And here's the key point that I pointed to earlier. The update with the statement from the representative and SPA's retraction was published in June 2019. So 2 years later was when they started. So yeah, basically, here are the 2 points here. The Variety article was published along with Spur's retraction, and it was omitted. The Spur's retraction was omitted in most of Ethan Klein's comments, where he just said Ryan Kavanaugh accused of running a Ponzi scheme. Omitted that key fact, right? That, well, the accusation was retracted. Pretty important fact to omit, and clearly gives a false impression to the viewer. And then campaign against Kavanaugh, this is kind of more circumstantial evidence that this was done with malice, right? The statements were made in hostility as a reaction to the Triller copyright claim, right? Like, why was Ethan Klein suddenly talking about this guy Ryan Kavanaugh and this article from 2 years ago? Well, there's a very obvious reason, because it was part of a campaign against Triller for the copyright claim, which is circumstantial, but again lends to the idea that this was done with malice and not because of sincere belief in the truth, which I guess is more this, right? Reckless disregard. Like, it didn't really matter whether the statement was true or not. What mattered was this campaign against Kavanaugh, I think is the point. And yeah, this is all kind of made here. Defendant's admission is proof of convincing clarity that supports a finding defendant's Ponzi scheme statements were not published in good faith but with actual malice. And defendants do not identify sufficient evidence that shows a lack of actual malice as a matter of law. And fair and true report privileges, I didn't go over this part, but basically it's like reporting something that someone else said, but the problem was that fair and true report privilege does not apply to the statements quoted in the complaint that are alleged to be defamatory. Defendant's statements that Kavanaugh's partner accused him of running a Ponzi scheme were not fair and true because, as they concede, they omitted in almost all instances the contact that Variety published an updated article stated that neither Kavanaugh nor SPA intended their complaints to be legally filed, and SPA retracted his allegation. SPA had explained, Kavanaugh has been funding the ESX operation himself, to my knowledge. He's been invested, and the Ponzi scheme is not accurate. Without SPA's retraction, defendant's report led the listener to be affected differently by the report than he or she would be by the actual truth. Thus, the fair and true report privilege does not apply to the complaint of statements. So what can we learn here? Basically, don't omit key details, right? It's not enough to just say something that's technically true because you may be implying things that are defamatory, which is what happened in this case. Leaving out very key details and only focusing on details that paint a very specific picture, which is that Ryan Kavanaugh is accused of running a Ponzi scheme, which leads to defamatory implications, etc. So yeah. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so my analysis isn't worth much, which is why I'm basically just relaying what is written in this document, which is written by a judge. And yeah, this basically, and yeah, the final finding, I guess I should say, just to sum it up here, was the order is affirmed. Kavanaugh is entitled to his costs on appeal. So yeah, so that is the appeals court ruling. And yeah, so we can see all of these elements as to why it was misleading. The key point is basically that there was this retraction that basically undercut the entire narrative that Kavanaugh was like a scammer or might have done a Ponzi scheme. And Ethan Klein and the H3 podcast crew chose to not present that in order to give a misleading impression of Kavanaugh's actions. So, yeah, regardless of what you think about Ethan Klein and Ryan Kavanaugh, it is what it is. It's pretty bad. So don't defame people, I guess, is the lesson of this. And yeah, all right, that's it.